Welcome, welcome. I am super excited to welcome you all to the latest session of Solving for the Most Vulnerable. As always, I hope that you find the content engaging, enlightening, and empowering. In this session, we're going to focus on learning our JEDI skills, my young Padawans. And as the great Bobo Boss has told us, the skill of control is the first we must master. This skill is about understanding yourself, your power, and how to wield it within you. Before we get into it, I do want to remind you that this part of the session is being recorded. If you are with us live today, you'll find a handout for the session right in the invite. You can use it to record your thoughts, the prompts that will be displayed throughout the session. This is our prompt slide. So when you see this, it is a visual signal to pull out your handout if you want, or whatever you're taking notes on to jot down your thoughts. As always, we're going to start with our commitments. And this time we're going to have a shared belief for us to ground ourselves on for the session. Then we'll jump right into learning about identities and how they impact our perceptions. From there, we'll talk about how to trouble those perceptual waters. We'll wrap up the recorded portion with talking about how this helps us solve for the most vulnerable and a sneak peek into the next session. After the recorded session, we will hold a live digestion. As with all our JEDI sessions, this will be a brave space, which calls for us to identify and address our individual discomforts while creating a safe environment for others to do the same. And since this is the me talking portion, I'm not going to read through the commitments individually, but I'm going to ask that you all commit to being brave as we review the content. Last session, I shared this quote. And this session, I want to leverage it to create a shared belief I'm going to ask you to hold for the next 30 minutes or hour or however long you want to. We are all, always changing the world. Our first reflection asks, what are 3 words that describe you? Identity is the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. It is also the qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and/or expressions that make a person. Identity is how you see and understand yourself. And everyone has an identity, just as everyone has a culture. Our identity is who we see when we look in the mirror. It is why we might get defensive when someone accuses us of having a characteristic that's against our self-perception. The note here is that identity is not a bad word. Our identities change as we change. There are many theories on how we develop self-identity, and we won't get into them here. But suffice it to say that you see yourself and you have an understanding of who you are, and that recipe includes all the aspects of you that you believe make you up. As you grow and move through the world, encountering different experiences, some aspects of yourself will evolve. For example, if you saw yourself as a musician when you were in a high school band, but you stopped playing as an adult, you may no longer see yourself as a musician. Or maybe you do, and just a musician without a muse. If someone saw you through a window, what 3 words would they use to describe you? How did you decide this? What things did you consider? Social identity indicates who you are in terms of the groups which you belong. It is who you are, some aspect of our identity in community with others who are similar to us in that way. It is how we see ourselves in relation to others. It is also how others see us in relation to others. Though it's important to note that not all social identities are visible, while there are some observable characteristics that may lead someone to see us as part of one group versus another, we are actually the writers of our labels. And it's not our fault that people can't always read our handwriting. Social identity labels are not bad, and neither is being in community with folks who you share similarities with. This is also where we get the language of multiple identities, because while your identity, the unique things that make you you, is singular, because, well, you're just one you. Social identities are the many ways we might belong to many groups. For example, I am a woman. I socially identify with women. I am also Black. I socially identify as Black. I am also bisexual, in a same gender relationship, physically disabled, chronically ill, a mother, a single one at that. I possess many social identities, and each one is important to how I see myself and is a reflection of how I am seen. What are 3 social identities you have? A social hierarchy is a system is systems of social organization in which individuals are arranged by group status and have differential access to social and material resources. In our society, our social identities determine our status. It determines access to opportunities and resources, to power. It is possible to predict the outcome of a person's success in our society based on their social identity. So while social identity isn't a bad thing, how it is and has been used in our society impacts our lives. Think, if you will, about passing, being seen, or allowing yourself to be seen through the window as a member of the identity and power. Throughout history, folks have made the choice to pass to protect themselves from disadvantages and have greater access to opportunities. Some LGBT folks may choose to pass as straight, particularly in work settings, to reduce the amount of discrimination they might otherwise face. Much the same, some Black people have chosen to pass in our society so they could access the advantages society bestowed on white people. There's a recent fiction book, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, that explores racial passing that, if you're interested, I recommend, as it kind of clearly portrays the ways whiteness is a passport into better. There are many hierarchies in our society. Each is individually devastating to those at every level of the ladder, and they all intersect in ways that multiply harms. It positions those at the top of the hierarchy to be closest to systemic power, which provides the greatest advantage, and those at the bottom, the furthest from that power, where they become targets for the greatest risk of harms and disadvantage. It reduces our ability to come together as a collective human family for the betterment of all in the world we share. For today, we are going to focus on just 3: race, gender, and class. We live in a white supremacist system that racializes all people within the society. It then places those who are or appear to be white, aka of European descent, at the top, and those who are or appear to be Black, aka of African descent, at the bottom. This organization is based mostly on phenotypic traits such as skin color, eye color, and hair texture. The darker the skin and eyes and the kinkier the hair, the further down on the hierarchy. Everyone else, all the brown folks, are trapped in the middle with varying proximity to whiteness and the systemic power it wields. We live in a patriarchal society that places those who are cisgendered men at the top and those who are transgender at the bottom. The gender hierarchy is premised on the belief that gender is binary and immutably defined by the observable sex organs a person is born with. This organization uses social norms of physical appearance, such as hairstyle, body type, appearance, clothing, and observable behaviors, such as the way one communicates or walks. Cisgendered women live in the middle with varying degree proximity to patriarchy and the systemic power it wields. We also live in a capitalist society that places those who are wealthy at the top and those who are poor at the bottom. The class hierarchy purports that those who have more material wealth are more valuable to society than those who have less. This organization uses measurements of material wealth and the experiences it provides, such as assets, vacations, and summer homes. Folks in the middle class have varying proximity to the systemic power of wealth. This is the wheel of power and privilege. It illustrates how close or far some identities are to the social power in society. Using the tool on the previous slide, we are going to reflect on the following. How close is your race, skin color identity to the power center? How close is your gender identity? What about your class identity? What comes up for you when you're seeing this? We, us here today, did not create the caste systems. We did not design the social hierarchy that segregates us. We do, though, all participate in it. We benefit from it. We are disadvantaged by it. Some of us more than others, but all are impacted. If you are identified as white, you are closer to power than those who are identified as Black. If you are identified as a cisgender man, you are closer to power than those who are identified as transgender. If you are identified as able-bodied, you are closer to power than those who are identified as disabled. The closer to the power, the more value our society says that you have. Acknowledging this is important to our goals of disrupting the systems that organize people by identity. We are not to blame for how we are seen. We should not feel ashamed when we look in our mirror and see our faces ebony to mahogany to walnut to oak, see our limbs present or absent, our hair kinky or straight, see ourselves Asian, Native, Black, or white. We are who we are, and we are whole as we are. In 1989, Kimberly Crenshaw, a pioneer in critical race theory, coined the term intersectionality to describe how the legal system's narrow definitions of discrimination impacted Black women who often face multiple aspects of discrimination and oppression in our systems. Since then, the term has taken on a broader meaning, describing the ways that a person can have multiply oppressed identities that create compounding oppression in our society. A person can also have identities that are oppressed and others that are socially powerful. Using myself as an example again, as a Black disabled woman, I live on the intersection of oppression of race, ability, and gender. Yet, as someone who is financially able to support myself and my family, I'm living with some class privilege. Depending on the context, that privilege can offset some of the discrimination I may face because of my race, gender, and ability. Yet, studies have shown that race and gender are some of the strongest determinants of success in our society. We can see that harsh reality in the health disparities. One such tragic statistic is that Black women in the United States have a maternal death rate that is 3.3 times higher than non-Hispanic white women. Where we fall in the social hierarchies determine our proximity to social power. The closer we are to the power center of our society, the more advantages we have access to, the more privileges we are given. A real-life example here would be Felicity Huffman, a wealthy white woman who only served 11 days in prison and got a 1 year of supervised release for her participation in a scam to get her child into college, while Kelly Williams Bowler, a Black woman served 10 days and was placed on probation for 3 years because she used her father's address to get her children in a better public school. Huffman's power, her race and class, gave her access to more leniency, where William Bowler's race and class, her distance from that same power, cost her 3 years of her freedom. Based on your proximity to power in race, gender, and class, what kind of privileges has that provided to you in your life? What kind of disadvantage did it cause you? Who we see in our mirror is impacted by how we are seen through the window. We come to see in our reflections the perceptions of ourselves through the social gaze. We internalize what society says about who we are based on how we are labeled and organized. Based on your race, gender, class, or intersection of all, what are 3 socialized stories or stereotypes about that identity? How has those stereotypes impacted your perception of yourself? What is one social identity that you do not possess that you hold socialized stories about? Can you recall where you may have first heard some of the stories? We just spent some time discussing how the social hierarchies we live within impacted how others perceive us and how we perceive ourselves. So next, we need to talk about how those same socialized stories impact how we see others. Another way to say this is we need to understand how biases impact our perceptions, thoughts, and actions. Because while we are great, special, fantastic, beautiful, loving people, we are not immune to those socialized stories about folks we share the world with. We are told that Black people are inherently violent, that women are overly emotional, that poor people are lazy. We are told that white people are safe, that men are natural leaders, that rich people are smart. And we all, on some or many levels, believe what we've been told. We believe, then feel, think, and act on those biased, prejudicial, stereotypical, and discriminatory beliefs. But we can undo the tangle of social stories and biases in our brain. We can rewrite the stories we hold about ourselves and our identities as well as others. We are not powerless to the whims and fables and systems in society. No, in truth, we are the most powerful, as we are storytellers in our own right, and we can change the narrative. If someone valued you only by your identity, what valuable things about you would they be missing? It can be uncomfortable to know that who we see in the mirror is not who is seen through the window, that our self-reflections, our value is not visible to those outside ourselves. It can be even more uncomfortable to know that we engage in that same kind of summarization of others. We see them, we assume about them, and then we move on. I urge you to sit with that discomfort. Don't run from it. Don't let your mind change the channel. Don't look for times when you didn't stereotype others. Don't excuse those times by bringing up times when you were stereotyped. Just sit. What is this a picture of? Sitting with our discomfort can help us move on to confronting and combating our own biases. It can reduce the amount of unconscious avoidance we generally have when we're doing work like this. Having biases is not an indictment on who you are as a person. We all have biases. In fact, it's actually a byproduct of the way our brains create shortcuts so that we can process information more quickly. Many of our biases live in our subconscious system, the system one, spitting out conclusions before our conscious mind even has a chance to fully understand the situation. Biases are a side effect of our brain's natural behavior. It's what we do with our biases that says something about us. And we have the power to determine what we want said. Think about your childhood environment, home, neighborhood, school. How many experiences did you have with people who were different from you? Were those experiences mostly positive, mostly negative? Our experiences create narratives in our mind. Our personal firsthand experiences, the experiences of those around us, the experiences we hear, read, and see others experiencing. Our brains take these experiences and turn them into stories that it uses as shortcuts to fill in the blanks and make things make sense. And our brains love stories. In order to edit our brain stories, we have to be willing to challenge what we think we see and what we think about what we've seen. We have to intentionally and committedly engage in self-interrogation. We have to continuously and consistently challenge our biases. We have to trouble the waters of our reflections. What are your strengths, stretches? When are you vulnerable or invisible? When do you feel empathy? When do you feel distance? One of the most impactful things I think we can all do to trouble the narratives we hold is to remember that we ourselves are complex, complicated, multifaceted beings. And just as we are, so are others. No one can be summed up in a single story. There are many great resources for understanding biases and learning how to mitigate them. You can find a couple of them in the resource section of the handout and written version. For the purposes of this session, I'm going to keep it short and focus on our unconscious biases, though some of these techniques will also work if you want to undo conscious biases. Think about where you live today. Is it similar in demographic makeup to where you grew up? Is your friend circle similar? What is your first memory of knowing that there were other identities? Was your first memory positive or negative? Our formative years have a huge impact on who we are today and how we see the world. Evaluating how your upbringing has shaped your perceptions help you understand the roots of some of your beliefs. That also gives you a way to challenge those beliefs today. It lets us ask ourselves if we want to hold on to views on race, gender, class, sexuality, etc., based solely on our upbringing. How often does a stereotype about an identity pop into your thoughts? When someone does something that makes you upset, do the stereotypes about their identity come to mind? Another good tactic is to be mindful of when stereotypes show up in our thoughts and words. I'd recommend spending a few weeks even recording the incidents. In a journal, you can keep track of context. Where were you? Why were you? Who else was around? Your mental and physical state. Were you tired, irritated, hungry? The target. What was the identity you stereotyped? What was the stereotype? And then name it. Was it racist, heterosexist, classist, ableist, ethnocentric, fatphobic, etc.? The point isn't to shame yourself, but to help you become aware of when and what kind of stereotypes come up for you so that you can begin to intentionally challenge them. Think of a time when one of your beliefs were questioned. What was the belief? Did it change your belief? Yes, I do think that asking questions is the most powerful tool and it solves for almost everything. It is literally my Swiss Army knife of life. When you recognize a bias rising in your mind, you can use questions to shift your brain into its system 2 computational mode by turning it into a question. It forces your brain to slow down, evaluate the situation. Over time, it can even train your system 1 to process situations differently. Pretend like your subconscious offerings are unsolicited feedback from someone you love. Advice, I meant to say advice. You know that they have your best interest at heart and that they mean well, yet they often lack context, and therefore you don't just take the advice, you evaluate it. Transform the prejudice into a question of your knowledge, skills, or experience. Interrogate what data set you're using and how you learn to use it. So, what are you relying on? Where did it come from? Is it the right tool for the situation? Are you using the right criteria set? Are you using it the right way? As an example, if you were asked about the leadership behaviors of your team and your first thought was that the men on the team are showing more leadership behaviors than the women, you might ask yourself, how am I defining leadership? Where did I get my definition? Is this the definition I should be using? Have I gathered any data to measure their leadership behaviors against the definition? Does any of this data point to women demonstrating equal or more leadership behaviors? Am I discounting some of the data because I just believe men are more likely leaders? You can convert the stereotype into a question and then break it down into specifics that are required to make it true. For example, always would be every single instance without exception. This forces our brain to more carefully evaluate the situation. It also forces range into our evaluative scale because it uses extreme language. Questioning your stereotype can look like turning Black people are always late into meetings into has every single Black person I've ever met been late to every meeting we've ever been in together. Before you act on your brain's A plus B equals C analysis of a situation, you should question the motivation of the action. What specific action am I taking? Will it address the issue? What's the state of the issue? Will taking the action do something? Make me feel something? Imagine you're chilling in your car and a person who appears to be unhoused is coming down the street and your brain says, lock your doors. Before you do that, you can ask questions like, what action am I taking? I'm locking my door. And that addresses me feeling unsafe. But it's a response to a future threat. It will make you feel safer, but it could also be a microaggression. This isn't a subtweet telling you that if you ever lock your door, you are classist or racist or sexist or any of those things. You may very well evaluate a situation like this and still choose to lock your door. The point is, by questioning your actions, you are asking yourself questions like this so you can be more deliberative versus impulsive. How do you prepare to make big decisions? What are some of the things you do? There's no magic wand that we can wave that will eliminate our biases or even keep us from acting on them. We have to do things that restrain their impact. And one thing to practice is preparing. After you've reflected on the impact of your upbringing, monitored when those beliefs appear in your mind, and begin questioning the validity of your actions, you have the tools you need to prepare to mitigate the influence they have on your behavior. When you know that you have beliefs about what a leader looks like, then you can take steps before, say, reviewing a GTKY or interviewing that will restrain acting on that belief. This could look like reviewing the job description to ensure you understand the requirements of the role, making sure you aren't hungry, thirsty, tired, distracted by other duties. Because when we are unavailable, when our mind, heart, or body has unmet needs, we are more likely to accept the unsolicited advice from our subconscious. Another way to prepare is actually very simple, but I found to be very impactful. Be transparent with yourself about your preconceived notions about an identity before engaging with them, and verbally affirm your intentions to not allow it to control your behavior. For example, if you have a bias against non-binary people, prior to engaging someone with that identity, you can say to yourself, I recognize my prejudice against non-binary people and that it shows up as avoidance. I will engage with non-binary people today instead of avoiding. We cannot eliminate biases from our subconscious. It is a built-in feature of our brain's natural processes. And for real, like if we did, imagine how long it would take to put on our shoes. And this is coming from someone that already has a lengthy shoe process. What we can do is mitigate the impact our biases have on our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. With intentional work, we can retrain those internal associations so the unsolicited advice from our system one is more inclusive and less harmful. So far in this session, we've talked about our identities, how those identities fit in the social hierarchy. We discussed how we are seen impacts how we see ourselves and others. Lastly, we touched on how we can control the narratives that we have been indoctrinated into believing and their influence on our actions and ways to mitigate their influence on our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Before we close out today, I kind of want to link it together with things from our previous sessions. How can the JEDI skill of control help you solve for the most vulnerable? How can it help you embed JEDI in your life? In our first session in the series, we learned that solving for the most vulnerable is a problem-solving perspective that centers the needs of the person or group that is most susceptible to risk or has the greatest need of support. And it has 4 steps. Recognize the problem, identify the most vulnerable, refine the problem from the perspective of the most vulnerable, and then design a solution to the refined problem. In our second session, we learned that JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Diversity being the differences of perspectives, equity being serving what is needed for folks to thrive. Inclusion is the utilization of those diverse, thriving perspectives, which leads us to justice, the system implementation, and its impacts. We've also covered how JEDI principles support our efforts to solve for the most vulnerable, how having diverse perspectives help us see problems that may not impact us directly, how equity and inclusion help us complete risk needs analysis by cultivating a brave space where folks are able to share what they need to thrive, how equity and inclusion help us cultivate an environment where we trust the most vulnerable to best understand the problem before us, how all 3 help us come together under the direction and leadership of the most vulnerable and designing a solution that solves that refined problem. And lastly, how justice requires us to interrogate our design, its implementation, and its impact, making corrections that bring us closer to our intentions while maintaining a commitment to equity and positive change. Our identities matter, both seen and unseen, those internally cultivated and externally applied. Where we are in relation to power matters. And by owning that truth, recognizing our place within the social hierarchy, it becomes easier to look around us and ask, what systems of social hierarchies are impacting the context? Where do I fall? What perspectives are missing? We ask these questions to locate ourselves so that we can locate others. We seek out diverse perspectives because we know that what we see isn't all there is to be seen. We can ask, are there others in this context that, based on their position within these hierarchies, that are at greater risk or in more need of support than I am? How is my identity and position in the social hierarchy impacting others? We ask these questions with equity and inclusion in mind. We want to be aware of ourselves so that we can intentionally make space for others. We want folks to have what they need to succeed, just as we want that for ourselves. We are willing to put others who are in greater need first. What biases am I holding about the most vulnerable group or person in this context? How are these biases impacting my ability to trust their leadership? We know that to be trusting the most vulnerable is very important to the step of refining the problem. And we want to be aware of what biases we are holding so that we can intentionally do the work of setting them aside. Designing a solution, we ask, how is how I see myself and others influencing how I interrogate the design? Here, we collaborate. While continuing to be aware of our perspective, we know that it is just our perspective and that the most vulnerable is the expert in the room. We want to make sure that our perspective isn't getting in the way of justice. If you are cited and on a team discussing implementing visual accessibility features in an application, everything your conscience spits out is going to be from your cited perspective. You are the closest to social power in this context. The system is literally designed for sighted users like yourself. You will have to trust the blind community's perspective into what makes an accessible application for them. That means being mindful of and setting aside biases that might creep up when thinking about all the extra work it might take to develop what they need. And accepting that the design isn't meant to serve you. You aren't the most vulnerable. Your role is to build the product with equity and justice in mind for those who are. In summary, as we move through the process, we want to use our control, our self-awareness, so that we can find ourselves in the social systemic context, which allows us to better see others and seek out the diverse perspectives we are missing. We want to be aware of what we are seeing out the window, our perspectives, and our biases. And we want to intentionally manage how our identities are impacting our efforts to solve for the most vulnerable. We covered a lot. And before we end the recorded discussion, I just want to do a quick review. Again, understanding where we are in social hierarchies allows us the opportunity to shed the false limiting stories that we have all been enculturated to believe about our identities and the identities of others. This understanding can help us decenter ourselves in implementing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion within every aspect of our lives. It helps us understand that in some contexts, we are the most vulnerable. In others, we are touching the burning sun of social power. And most importantly, that wherever we are, in whatever context we are in, those we share our world with are just as complex, brilliant, and deserving of radical love as we are. I hope you all enjoyed the session today. I hope you learned why these things are important to our solving for the most vulnerable. In our next session, we're going to talk about the JEDI skill sense. And in that session, we'll learn how to see and interrogate the impact of social systems around us and how we can use our JEDI skills to impact the system.